Welcome back to day 2 of Habitat-Spokane's virtual Hope Builders Luncheon presented by Banner Bank. Let's take a moment to pray.
Y te pedimos también bendiciones para las familias que ya han recibido sus hogares y las que están preparándose para mudarse en sus nuevas habitaciones. Te pedimos también, Padre, que sigas manteniéndonos en tu divina providencia. En particular, te pedimos por buena salud para todos, más especialmente para los que están afectados por el COVID-19 y para el personal médico que los atienden. Amén.
My name is Aaron Luna. I'm a board member for Habitat for Humanity-Spokane. I'm also the evening anchor for 4 News Now. Yesterday, we heard from Michelle Gerardo, Habitat's CEO. We also recognized several key supporters who made huge impacts over the past year. This event is possible thanks to Banner Bank and a generous grant from F5 Networks who stepped up to provide funding to go virtual. The Habitat has received significant media support from the Pacific Northwest Inlander and iHeartRadio. And a huge shout out to all of our table sponsors. Thank you for sticking with us as we go virtual. Assurus Northwest Health, Avista, Bank of America, Columbia Bank, Integris Architecture, SRM, Witherspoon Kelly, and Ziggy's. For 33 years, Habitat for Humanity-Spokane has been addressing one of today's most urgent social issues, and that's housing. With your help, families in partnership can stand on their own, achieving stability and self-reliance of home ownership. Better, more affordable housing leads to stronger childhood development and increases the ability and financial flexibility for a family to make forward-looking choices, a critical element to being able to survive these shelter-in-place and social distancing times. Stable housing means children do better in school and see improved graduation rates. Families achieve improved physical and mental health. Stability allows homeowners to make investments for their long term. Families are in a better position to seize new and seize more opportunities. Today's keynote speaker knows firsthand the value of a healthy family foundation. Dr. Michael McDonell is an associate professor in the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine at Washington State University. He's the director of behavioral health innovations, a clinical psychologist with over 20 years' experience developing, testing, and implementing strength-based interventions for families affected by addiction and mental illness. Dr. McDonell conducts several studies examining impact of housing-based intervention of the mental and physical health of children and families. And please welcome Dr. McDonell.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michael McDonell, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Medicine at Washington State University, right here in Spokane. My work at WSU focuses on developing and testing new interventions to support families who have been affected by mental health problems or addiction. And through that work, I've learned that economic inequalities are one of the biggest causes of mental health and addiction disparities in our community. And one of the biggest economic inequalities we face as a nation and right here in Spokane is related to affordable housing and access to affordable housing. So today I want to talk to you about how a home is the foundation for a happy and healthy family, and how COVID-19 is causing a crisis for the very families that Habitat is here to help. And with your support, Habitat for Humanity is uniquely positioned to combat the crisis and help families break a cycle of poverty through home ownership. This is my beautiful family. I'm the son of Richard and Joanne McDonell, who live in Central Washington. I grew up in Central Washington. We had a wonderful childhood, especially as an adolescent. We had a beautiful house that my parents owned. But before we were able to move out to Central Washington, my parents were really struggling financially. And in fact, we had to at one point work with my aunt to buy a mobile home that was in a really dilapidated state. We tore that thing down to bare bones and rebuilt it, and were able to live there until we could get enough support from our community to actually be able to move out to Washington State. And so that experience really formed the way I think about housing and the importance of housing around mental health and around health for kids, because I remember as a young boy being really aware of the financial stress my parents were under. Knowing my dad didn't have a job consistently, knowing that we might not be able to live in and have a house to live in that was our own, as opposed to my adolescence where I really knew that we had our own home, that we owned it, that was a stable place for our family. And then I went on to Gonzaga for school, and then on to graduate school. I met this wonderful woman, Naomi, who I'm married to, and she's a faculty member at WSU. We have these two beautiful kids, Liam on the top, who's real silly, and Oliver right below him, who's a little more serious and wants to be an astronaut. So never before have we been at home and with our families like we are now. We have all this uncertainty. We are at home, spending time with our families. Some of us are separated from our families. We can't be together. And I want to tell you as a psychologist and as a health equity researcher, two things. One, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. It's going to be painful. It is painful. And it's going to last for at least another year, this new reality we're living in, until we can find a vaccine. But we're all going to get through this, and most of us will get through it just fine. It won't be painful and uncomfortable, but we'll get through it. The folks who are going to struggle, and I'm going to show you some information about that, the folks who are going to struggle the most are middle to low income people, many of whom are just fighting to get that American dream, to be a homeowner, to have a living wage, to be able to support their families, to not have to live paycheck to paycheck. Those are the families that are going to be harmed the most by this crisis. So first I want to talk to you about inequity in America. And this is a graph that splits our population, our country up into three groups of income levels, right? The lowest income is the bottom line. The middle income on that line graph is our folks in the middle line. And then that upper third of income is the top line. And then this is graphing wealth, the percentage of wealth owned by those three groups in 1983 and comparing that to 2016. What you see here is that wealth hasn't really changed. The amount of wealth that the poorest folks own hasn't changed, but it's a middle income group. They've gone from owning 32% of the wealth, or having 32% of the wealth, to 17%. It's almost half that the wealth they've lost. And that wealth has gone to the upper income folks. So if you think about how do middle income people build wealth? Well, many have a pension or an IRA, but most of the way they build wealth is by home ownership. And so as you can see, this figure is suggesting that middle income people are less and less likely able to attain that dream of home ownership and being part of that middle class. So our middle class is dwindling. So what this slide shows is inequality comparing the top 20% of earners in their income, their average income, to the bottom 20% of earners in their average income. And the gray line is comparing that top 20% to the bottom 20% for our whole state. The crimson line, or the red line, on top of that is the top 20% compared to the bottom 20% earnings for Spokane County. And so what you'll see here is that across our state, people who are in that top 20% of income have 13 times higher income than people in the bottom 20%. And what was shocking to me is that disparity, that inequity, is even worse in Spokane. So in Spokane, in the last couple of years, us that are in the top 20% of earners make 14 times more than the folks in the bottom 20%. That's a pretty shocking inequity. When we look at how does that affect children, right? How does that affect children? We know most of these things already. Most of you are aware of many of these things. So either living in poverty really equals living in poor housing conditions. And that means that you're more likely as a child to experience violence in your neighborhood. You're more likely to experience exposure to allergens, unsafe living conditions that cause allergens. You're more likely to be exposed to lead poisoning. And we've seen in Michigan the effects of that. And that causes long-term brain problems for kids. On the far end of that spectrum, for homeless kids, they're 4 times more likely to be sick than other kids. And that means they're going to miss school more. And of course, we don't want them to be sick either. They're twice as likely to have ear infections. They're 5 times more likely to have problems with their gastrointestinal tract or tummy problems, make them sick. And they're 4 times more likely to develop a chronic condition like asthma. So poverty and poor housing has a real effect on the physical development of kids and their physical health. So that's all before COVID-19. So I want to talk a little bit about COVID inequity. And these are social distancing practices divided by divided by 5 groups around income. So at the bottom here, you see the bottom quintile. Those are the folks in the United States who make less than $24,000 a year. The top quintile, the top 20%, is folks who make over $180,000. And you can see there are 2 different kinds of social distancing practices. And what you can clearly see is that the group that's the top quintile, look how much more likely they are to social distance than especially the low to middle income quintile. Those folks who make $24,000 to $47,000, they are not just able to keep themselves as safe as some of us in the higher income groups are. And why is that? Well, think about it. These are the folks who are working at Target. These are folks who are working for Grubhub. These are folks that are working at Walmart. These are the folks that are keeping the economy going, that are making sure that we have the food and other things that we need. And so they need to do that because they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're just getting by already. They don't want to lose their job. They can't lose their job. And so they can't social distance. And so they're had a higher chance of catching COVID as a result. So what happens now? That's sort of some initial data. You've all seen probably unemployment is at record highs. So what happens though in not just in the short term, those are the short-term impacts. But what's the long-term impact of COVID? And so this is a graph that looks at wage growth by 4 different income groups. The blue line is the line I really want you to pay attention to. That blue line is the top 25% of earners. And so you could see at the beginning of 1998, that group was their average wages were increasing at 6 to 7%. Wow. And what you'll see is that then we have a few historical events. If we look at that from 2008 to 2014, we see the impact of the Great Recession on wage growth. It was bad for everyone. But what you see after each one of these dips is that blue line recovers faster and it recovers to the point where it was before. Whereas the other lines, they incrementally get lower and lower and lower. So every time we have an economic crisis, wage growth in that bottom 75% of individuals gets lower and lower. It's less and less. Whereas in the top 25%, it gets back to where it was and maybe even exceeds it. So what we're going to see probably with COVID, because it's predicted to be more and have more of a negative effect than even the Great Recession on our economy and on employment and on wage growth, is that those folks in the middle class are at greatest risk of long-term consequences from this problem. So what can we do? We must realize that we are in an inequity crisis. It was already happening. COVID-19 is going to make it much worse. It's going to be a crisis that's not just a short-term crisis, but a long-term crisis. More and more families are now at risk for falling out of that middle class, out of the hopes and dreams that all of us have as Americans of owning a home, of having a living wage, of sending our kids to college. And so we must act now to break this cycle of intergenerational poverty. And there's no better way to do that than through home ownership, because home ownership is one way that families break that cycle of poverty and they become healthy and happy families. And Habitat for Humanity, like no other organization, is just perfectly suited to help families who are so close to home ownership, who have worked so hard, who are willing to put that blood, sweat, and tears into a home, who want to have a healthy and happy family. They're just so well positioned to do that. So I ask all of you who can donate, who own wealth in our community, to share that wealth by clicking below, finding the link below, clicking on that link to donate, finding those links to some of the other talks and inspirational stories you can hear about. Because Habitat's work is so essential to how we deal with the housing crisis we already have in Spokane in the short term, and how we fundamentally solve the housing crisis in Spokane for the long term. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Providing a home base is part of the path out of poverty. Achieving home ownership is no easy task. I want to thank our table hosts and sponsors who make it possible for Habitat to achieve their mission of building homes, communities, and hope. Their incredible support and partnership makes it all possible. Spokane is a generous community. Together, we can build the strength, stability, and self-reliance to lift our neighbors up and out of the trenches. Hope Builders Luncheon is presented by Banner Bank. Their longtime partnership with Habitat has helped many families achieve the stability Dr. McDonell talked about. Today,
Excuse me, Aaron. I am so sorry to interrupt. We have a really special announcement from Banner Bank. I want you all to hear about it. This is so exciting. Banner Bank has issued a $20,000 challenge grant. For every new or additional $2 given to Habitat before May 4th, Banner Bank will give $1 up to $20,000. To unlock this grant, together we need to raise $40,000 in new or additional gifts starting today. We have until May 4th to make that happen, and we know that with your efforts, we will get there. This is wonderful news because with this additional funds, we could house 2 more Habitat families who need that affordable home ownership and a safe place to call home. Here to say a few more words about Banner Bank is Habitat's new board member, James Numata.
Hey everyone, and thanks for joining such an awesome event. I'm James Numata with Banner Bank, and I'm also a board member of Habitat. This is the first time in modern history where a health crisis has turned into an economic crisis. The longer that this continues, the more of an impact it's going to have on housing. Thankfully, we have Habitat for Humanity. Their services are becoming even more important. Please join us, Banner Bank, by leaning in and giving whatever you can. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you.
Wow, you heard it there, $20,000 challenge grant. For every new additional $2 given to Habitat before May 4th, Banner Bank will give $1 up to $20,000. Thank you for the incredible support. That's quite a way for a new board member to make an entrance. Welcome to the family, James, and thank you, Banner Bank. Now we need you to help unlock the challenge match. If you have already given, thank you so much. If you can still help by encouraging your friends and networks to give, please do so. Together, we need to raise $40,000 in new or additional gifts to unlock Banner Bank's $20,000 for Habitat for Humanity-Spokane. Remember, for every $2 given, Banner Bank will give $1 up to $20,000. On the screen there is a Donate Now button. Click on it and make your gift or an additional gift. Additionally, you can mail a check to the Habitat office. If you have your pen and paper ready, it's P.O. Box 4130, Spokane, Washington 99220. Once again, that's P.O. Box 4130, Spokane, Washington 99220. Well, this has been a really fantastic second day. Please join us again tomorrow. You're going to hear from current Habitat kids, and they're going to tell you about what it's like growing up in their safe and healthy home. We'll see you then.